What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Project Build Series, where I take this Cutlass wagon I found in this dude's backyard, pull it out of the weeds, and start tearing this thing apart. I'm building this car to be my next power tour car. It's going to be pretty unique. I'm all about the unique cars, and this one is definitely going to be one of them. This car is getting a 3800 with an F23 5-speed manual, and also a turbocharger. I still have some secrets up my sleeve I have yet to reveal, but in the last few videos you guys watched me put the 3800 into the car, build my own engine mounts, build the exhaust for this thing, and build an intake for this thing as well too. So in this video, we're going to continue on where we left off, wrap up the intake, work on some of this rust, replace all the brake lines, replace all the fuel lines, put a new fuel tank into it, and then just, in general, knock out a lot of the rust that's been driving me nuts in this thing. So if you're into that, stay tuned. Let's just dive into this project. Alright guys, so it is a day. It is one of them. So I'm working on the car here again. Goal for tonight is to finish up this intake completely, get it ready for paint, and then also I want to pull the engine out of the car. On the intake manifold, I want to put like a little plate here or something like that to kind of say, oh yeah, it's a 3800 or something. And I'll try and do something like that today to try and give it some bling to break up the big blob of blue that's going to be here once that's all done. So I'm hoping I can sort that out. I also want to smooth out these exits in the runners of the intake. So I want to get rid of that lip there. Basically, I'll just put some metal down in there to give it a straight shot downwards probably. That way it's not such an abrupt transition down to that angle shot there. So that's the plan for that. I'm hoping I can get that done today. Hoping I can get this thing on here today too. Cut a section of it, something like this. This is a chunk of aluminum. I think what I'm gonna do is basically use my die grinder to almost like sort of engrave in the words 3800 S2 or Series 2. Not sure yet, but it's gonna have something there. And the point of that is that this is gonna be something I can bolt on, bolt off. So it's just a plate. So if I want to change it later on, I can do it. And it's not a big deal. I don't have to change the intake or anything like that afterwards. So, all right, she's got some bling now. I made this little bracket to put on this little piece of aluminum. I think the angle's gonna be okay in the car. It's not gonna matter too much. Let's see, hope it's not too hot. So I've got some M6 bolts here holding this on, socket cap, screws. So nice little looking deal there. Then I made this little bracket out of sheet metal, put some riv nuts in there, and then there you can see it's just kind of welded in there a little bit. So it would be pretty easy to take this off if I have to, and then just kind of machine all this flat afterwards. So hopefully it doesn't come down to that ever, but I think this is good enough for now. It's definitely good enough for who it's for. So at this point, this intake is ready to be painted, but it is way too cold outside to do any of that. So I'm going to basically set this off to the side somewhere, and then tomorrow, sometime during the day, hopefully I'll come back and paint this thing, make it look somewhat decent, protect it from rust. And I will probably go through and paint the inside too. I'm not really sure yet. So we'll see what I do about that. And I'm pretty sure that turbo leaks too, so it's going to get coated with oil anyway. So it's probably not going to rust from the inside. So what I did do though is I put in these little wings in here to stop the airflow from getting caught in that little spot. I drilled some holes in each of those too because those are sealed spots. I want to get some oil in there to just protect it from rusting. So I'll just like probably spray some WD-40 in there, shake it all up, and let it drip out after the paint's in there and call it all good. So I think that'll be the plan for that. But otherwise though, I think this intake is basically done. So what I'll work on now is fixing the motor mounts. I think what I'm going to do for this is first I'll clearance just a little bit more. It needs a little bit more off of this up there. So I'll work on some of that. And then also I will weld in a plate here so this looks like it was intended to be like that. Then as far as getting this in the frame, this is all sheet metal. It's not very thick. This one has like nuts on the other side of it. I don't want to drill holes in this and put nuts in there and weld the nuts to it. So I think I'm going to take the easy way out in this one and just use the old nut-sert tool. So picked up this idea from Hot Rod Garage way back in the day. These things should be pretty cool. I'll just drill a hole for these. They're little rivets with a little threading on the back of them, and that should be good enough for this. It's not like these bolts are going to take that much stress because you have this bracket that basically grabs onto the front of the frame rail up front. So this is what's taking all of that force. This is just keeping it down from going somewhere. So I think that should be okay. The thing is, there's no way of telling what's inside of this because this is all one closed off piece. There isn't any way of accessing this from the inside or from the bottom. So I'm not sure how they have this going in here. It was probably assembled like it. So whether it's a plate or a cage nut or just a simple nut, I'm not sure, but there's no way of knowing, and I can't really replicate that without taking this whole thing out. And I could do that. I could, but I don't want to. So I'm going to go ahead and just basically mark these holes where this is going to sit. Kind of get this all centered up in here, and I think it's going to be about right there. That'll be pretty good, I think. And then just take my good old Sharpie, mark the holes, and you can see these are ovaled holes, so it's not like it needs to be perfect. And then just drill them out, throw the riv nut or the nutsert in, and then we'll have a motor mount bolted to the car. So making progress. We're gonna keep plugging away at this thing. It feels like a lot that needs to be done still, but you know, you gotta bite the elephant one bite at a time. So since this car was never designed to have two upper dog bone mounts here, I had to go ahead and just clearance this thing and make sure it cleared the hood because it was a tight fit and I actually contacted it beforehand. And now that I had done that, I just had to go ahead and make sure this thing actually looked decent. Alright, so I verified the hood fits pretty well. Doesn't hit anything as far as I can see here. So I think I'm on the home stretch now. I think I'm home free in this thing. No extra weird marks there aside from the one I got on there the first time. I will wire wheel that off, brush it off, paint it, paint both of these actually when that time is right, and make this thing look pretty good. Alright, so for those of you who watched my video about putting the engine in the car, and we're curious if you can actually use that W-body bracket, the answer is no. It doesn't fit. The problem is it's offset too far to the right on here, so towards the back of the engine. You really need to go over about a whole inch or so. Otherwise though, it's very close. The bolts almost line up, but it's just not enough though to actually fit this in the car. I could modify the bracket to extend it out there a little bit further, but I think it's going to be easier for me to modify the A-body bracket for the 3.3. And you can see here, this is the reason why I had to modify that bracket. I'm trying to run the newer V5 compressor that's on like the late 90s, early 2000s W-bodies. Just because I have one around, I'm familiar with them, I know how they work, and I know how that system needs to get plumbed and wired to make it work too. So here's a bracket for that, and you can see it's actually in the way, or the engine mount's in the way of the bracket. So I need to cut this thing somewhere around here, I'm thinking. And probably what I'll do is I'll take this material off right here, where I've got that marked, and then just probably tack it on down here instead, or brace this thing up with all some more material on there, and keep this thing looking strong and feeling strong and doing strong stuff. Alright, so I cut out this little piece right here on this thing. It kind of sat just like that. So that's how that was. This is about a 1/4 inch thick sheet metal. I'm not sure how thick it is, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this thing right back in here. On this side, I'll do a little notch somewhere along here, and then just burn that thing right back in. It'll be good as new. Here we go. It's all set and done now. So I'm going to bolt this right back in the car. Pretty confident this is going to fit nicely. I just want to point out for the record, these welds did look good. I just sanded them down though because I wasn't sure if the engine is trying to get flush against this. So just in case, I went ahead and just sanded them down all the way. I'll go ahead and bolt it in the car and hopefully it all fits. Okay, good news. The AC compressor bracket actually fits the car. It works around the motor mount. And we have the AC compressor in here right now, and it's looking pretty good. That is kind of tight against the exhaust manifold. I don't know what they were thinking with that, but that's not great. Heat does go up, but that's like almost contacting that thing, man. Come on. As far as this stuff goes, this bracket, the AC compressor, the manifold, the engine, it thinks it's a 99 Buick Regal GS. So there's no reason why this should be contacting this thing at all. It's not great. But the good news is it fits around the motor mount. The bad news is it's contacting the exhaust, which is like, come on. So this compressor came out of my 99 Buick Regal. It was like brand new when I bought it. So this thing has like maybe 5,000 miles on it. It's sat in a shelf for the last 4 years, and it's finally having its comeback story. So I'm finally getting some use out of this thing, as long as I can sort this out. So I'm not happy about that. What I might do, I might just like torch the crap out of this thing and then just beat on it with a hammer until it clears it, because I really don't like that. But otherwise, though, this is looking good. So I got the motor mount on here now. Finally, I got the riv nuts in. It's looking pretty good. This will all get painted here once this is all said and done. But otherwise, though, it clears the hood. It's looking good, and I think I'm going to be happy with that thing. So that's awesome. I'll go ahead and throw the other one back in here too, and get this thing moving to its next step. So next thing I want to do is start pulling this engine back out of the car. I am done doing mock-ups. I'm done testing where things are going to fit. So I'm going to pull apart the turbo, pull all that stuff off, unbolt all the engine mounts, and then just rip this thing back out. That'll give me good access to everything underneath the hood, so I can start tearing apart this AC box, replace every component on this: blower motor, the AC evaporator, the heater core, all the important stuff. The car has 275,000 miles in it. I have no idea of the condition of any of that stuff. It's a pretty safe guess, I think, to assume that if they haven't been replaced already, there's probably an issue somewhere in those. Things break, things get old, things rust through, things oxidize. So better safe than sorry. Just replace the whole thing while I'm in here. Once I have all this stuff out, I'll be able to get to everything super easy, and then just start mocking up fuel lines, fix the brake lines, power steering lines, everything that I can get to, I'm going to do with the engine out of the car, and then finish up that clutch pedal too, probably. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this. I'll catch up with you guys later. Alright, so the engine is out of the car now, finally. I've been avoiding this because this means I have more work to do, but we're getting after it here. So this is what it looks like now, again. So this should look pretty familiar with a bit more metal shaping, so I'll clean up some of that stuff. I've got a whole list of stuff that could be tackled now, but now that the engine's out, I have basically 3 different threads open to me now. Car now. Alright, so I've got the W-body power steering lines in here. It looks like this is going to work a little bit. There's some work that's going to need to be done to the return. The pressure side looks like it might be okay. I did bend these things a little bit to make them fit a little bit better. I'm not thrilled with the location, but it's going to work, and it's not going to get in the way of the exhaust at all from what I can see. So I think I'm in the clear there as far as all that goes. So I'll need the engine in the car though to really sort this out and make sure it all fits. Thankfully, with the manual transmission, all that space there is clear to me, so it's easy to get in and out of there. So basically what you have here is you have your return line with its little coolant loop it has there, and I'll probably rotate this whole thing like this somehow, so that way it's, you know, out of the way of the CV joints, and bend this back somewhere. And then this is the pressure side, so this basically loops around like this somehow. And then this hose will just stick out there like that. So I'm not sure how much of that is going to be in the way of anything, but I think this is going to work though otherwise for all of that. Well, I've got the AC box out of the car, or off the car, and we have a bit of a nest of just branches. I think this is just accumulation from you know, stuff that falls through these cracks, gets in there, and then the blower motor just shoots them out through here. So I don't think there's any critters so far. I haven't pulled this out yet, so I'm gonna go ahead and just pull this out too. I think it really does just pull out. So oh, I've got that hose down there. That hose is hosing me, so I think this, yep, that unclips somehow, so I have to unclip that. I'm not sure how this comes out yet either for the heater core, because that's behind here. So somehow I've got to get in there and pull that out. So it is definitely got some stuff in there. This might be the original. Looks pretty old. I didn't want to go this far, but here we are. So I'm really glad I did this now, because this is one of those cars where you really have to take apart everything to get to the heater core. I don't know that this was possible with the dash in the car. It would have been tight if it was possible at all, but I got the heater core out. It's actually interesting. So this is the old fabled copper heater core that you don't find anymore in new cars, and you can't get reproduced anywhere. So this is actually worth something. It looks like it could have been leaking. I can't really tell. There's some marks on here. There's some lines running down it there. Also right here too, you can kind of see. So it may have been leaking, or it may not have, you know, but it's got so many miles on it that I think it's a good idea to just replace it anyway, even if it wasn't leaking, and then I can always check it later on. I'd rather be safe than sorry, because this is so hard to get to, and I'm just gonna put the new one in, which not as big actually. A little bit less thick. It's aluminum, which is next best material to copper, I suppose. It is what it is. I'm not upset about it. It's gonna work just fine. So copper obviously is a lot better, but aluminum is gonna be fine too. The fins are a lot more thinner in this one, so that's interesting. So maybe that will make up for some of that difference. I feel good about this. I know the copper is better. Honestly, don't really care. So I'm going to shove this aluminum one in and call this good. All right, guys. So one of the things I'm going to be working on with the car is the brake lines. I am doing this under protest against myself because I know that I should do it, but I really don't want to do it because brake lines, let's be honest, they suck to work on. They're messy, they're hard to replicate, and it's just a nightmare underneath all of this rust and all this other stuff. But seeing stuff like this down here, like this zip tie on that fuel line and the brake line, makes me think that somebody has messed with this, and I probably need to fix this up anyway. Plus, having this many miles in the car, you're really going to have some brake line issues. So I might as well just get out in front of it and get some good stuff in here and figure this out ahead of time. Now, I don't know what kind of brake fittings this uses, whether they're an inverted flare or a bubble flare. I'll take these apart and see what they are. But I've got some copper nickel brake lines for this. I know they're all 3/16. Here we go, whole new roll of this, about 25 feet. That should be enough for the whole car, considering it's about 18 feet front to back, but we're not going all the way front to back, so I think it should be good enough for it. So I think I've got enough here to do the car. If not, I can always order more. It's not a big deal. If these are bubble flares, I'm in trouble because I've never done that before. I'll have to learn how to do it, but I do have a pretty good brake flaring tool, so I'm not that worried about it. And I want to do this all while the engine's out of the car, so that will be a lot easier, hopefully. What I'll do first is pull all these off and see what these look like as far as the fittings go. Don't know what size they are. What's weird is that this is a smaller fitting than this one, and the rest of them are all this size, so that's concerning. So maybe somebody's been here before, but I don't know, because this is all coiled up. Nobody does this. Nobody coils these things up except for the factory. And you just don't buy brake line kits for these things. So I'm just gonna start pulling out wrenches and find something that fits. This one is a 14. Use 14 somewhere, I guess. No, it had to be right here. This is probably a 12. 14, probably another 12. 12, I mean, that's a 14. So I got 14 here, probably 12, probably a 12. This makes no sense because you've got smaller fittings on opposite ones. So are those rears? Those rears or fronts? I don't know. You'd think fronts would be up front here and rears would be these ones right here. So I will have to do some investigating. Okay, well, the bad news is that these are bubble flares. I'm gonna learn today, aren't I? So I'm gonna go ahead and well, I'm gonna make sure I have the right tools for sure for that. I've got a nice crimper that I've never used before that I bought for the other car but never used. So I'll see if my crimper can do this, and then if it can, I'll just start pulling these bolts off, rip this Band-Aid off right away before there's issues. So I brought out my insanely expensive hydraulic flaring tool that I've barely ever used because I've always done the old school way and I haven't had to do brakes in a while. So here I have the 3/16 roll of brake line, and this thing made this stupid easy. It was just one setting of the tool, and here I have my first bubble flare. First one I've ever done, and it's actually pretty good looking, so I feel really good about this. So we are a go. All systems are go on this. So I'm going to go ahead and start tearing off these brake lines. All right, so I've spared you guys from the torture of watching me try and bend brake lines and fit this stuff inside of the car. I have 3 of the brake lines done. You can see I use the new copper nickel. I reused as much of the stock fittings as I could, and so far I've been able to reuse all of them, thankfully, so that's been nice. So we have the driver's side front done already. That's in there and out of the way. I do still need to like bolt these things to the car still, so that's not done yet. Passenger side's in here. Also have the passenger side rear, so that's up here so far. Going back to the stock rubber hose. Now I do need to replace all the rubber hoses still, so some of the stuff still isn't tight. This still has a stock hose here, but this is easy to replace if I need to, so I didn't bother with that. I might still do it. We'll see. Running into an issue right now where this is all I've got. So I'm out of brake hose. I thought 25 feet would be more than enough to do this car. I was wrong, so I need to go buy some more. And I thought I had some more lying around here too somewhere, just in case. But I've searched my whole garage and I've not been able to find any brake hose yet. So this will have to wait to finish that one side until the end. But so far it's coming along. It's not looking too bad either. And was able to reuse all these stock clips here on this side at least, since they just clip straight to the line. So yeah, so it's coming along. I just have to get some more brake hose before I can actually finish the brake lines on it. And I need to order some of the rubber hoses too before I can finish that. But so thankfully all the brake lines weren't too bad to take off. Some were pretty rusty. We've got some sitting here. This one was pretty bad actually right here. This fitting was basically rusted to it, so this is one that was concerning. It's really just kind of this back section. This is in the rear, the right rear of the car. So the new ones, the copper nickel lines, in case you didn't know, copper nickel is extremely flexible, extremely easy to work with. It doesn't rust, supposedly. I haven't tried it long enough. This car uses all copper nickel too. So any car I do brake lines on, I do all copper nickel. The bubble flares were surprisingly easy to do as well, so that wasn't a big deal at all. And actually, that was way easier than the old school inverted flare, so I was really happy with that actually. So that's gonna do it for tonight. We'll catch up tomorrow. We'll finish this thing off once I have new brake lines in. So of course I saved the best for last with the brake lines. This is the worst one. This is the driver's side rear, and it came off in multiple different pieces. It started leaking as soon as I started pulling it out, so I'm glad I replaced this one. This was definitely the worst one out of all of them. Okay, so as you can see here, this was probably one of the worst of the brake lines, and this is the one that has actually destroyed itself while I was trying to loosen it. Thankfully I got it loose. It was pretty sketchy, but did end up breaking the brake line itself with it. Hopefully I can still get the rest of the brake line out of that fitting. All right, I managed to get this brake line out of this fitting. Basically I had to put it in the vise and then just grab it by the front of it and twist it until it came out. I got it out and then had to clean this thing up too because I don't have any of these apparently. So I think these are bubble flare specific type of fittings because all the ones I have are threaded all the way to the end of it. So I'm assuming that helps it seal somehow. And first I'm doing bubble flares, haven't done this before. So naturally I'm going to reuse the fittings as much as I can because it's probably fine, right? When I put the new copper nickel brake line in here, it won't actually rust because it's copper nickel. So it's fine on this side towards the flare. It's just rusty on the other side. So we'll just look at the side in the front and just ignore the back side of it. And it'll be fine. All right, so I am just checking to see if these wheel cylinders are gonna work. The wheel cylinder is basically the mechanism inside the brake drum that actually pushes the shoes out. The other side is no good. That one needs to get replaced, but this one, even though it came off hard, it looks like it's gonna work. So here we go. I'm just gonna go ahead and start applying some vacuum on this thing and suck this all out. That's some good minty looking fluid. So as you can see here, eventually I came to my senses and realized if one wheel cylinder is bad, the other one's not far behind, so I just decided to replace that. And then that snowballed into, let's just replace all of the shoes and the drums and everything else. So with that sorted out and all new hydraulic hoses done, the brakes were finally pretty much all done, except for the front pads and rotors and all that. Well, I did it. I went and pulled the fuel tank down. I didn't think I was going to do it, but I did it tonight anyway because I'm already down here. I'm already dirty. I might as well knock it out. And actually, it wasn't that bad to pull out. It came off pretty easily. This fuel line disconnected itself voluntarily. Once again, this car just wants to come apart, so that was great. The rest of these, not so great. This one here goes to the fuel filter. That came off easily, but this one is pretty rusted on, so this one's not really coming off easily. So I know for sure this under has to go and get replaced just because it's so rusty. I might as well just replace the whole fuel tank while I'm at it. I'm going to be running E85 in this car, so no point in having a rusty fuel tank. Go ahead and put in a brand new tank. So that's what I'm going to do. Typically what happens when you get these things is that they come with bare metal, so there's no paint on them at all, but they have like a coating of some sort of oil on top of them. And I came out here to kind of strip it down and get that oil coating off of it, get ready for paint, but looks like they did that for me, so I didn't have to do any of that. I was very pleasantly surprised to see this. So it's already primered, so I don't even need to paint it. I can just put it in the car and send it. So that's what I'm gonna do. Kind of cool. You can see the baffles in there. Shout out to Dorman for actually painting their tanks and not sending me a tank that's just bare metal. So this thing won't rust. That's awesome. All right, so back in the garage now. I've got the new sending unit ready to go in this thing too. Well, really, it's not ready quite yet. You can see it obviously doesn't have a fuel pump yet, so I need to install the new fuel pump. And for this car, I'm going to be using the Walbro 455 liter per hour pump. So it's a big pump, and it draws a lot of power. And I learned the hard way on this car that that thing needs a lot of wiring going into it. This harness is just not going to cut it for that thing. So what I'll have to do here is I'll have to drill a hole in this harness or in the sending unit somewhere to send a 10 gauge wire through this thing, at least a 12 gauge minimum. And that way I can actually get enough power into this thing, and I'll just have to seal it up somehow and just make sure it doesn't leak. So here we have the new pump. This is the Walbro 455. I also have the kit for it too, to include the strainer and also the harness. So there's that for this thing. I'm not sure how it's going to fit on the sending unit, but this looks pretty similar to the G-body setup. Okay, I guess I didn't need that at all. So it came with like everything I needed. Okay, oops, oh well. Okay, so here's the pump. You can see this has like a 5/16-ish fitting there. The biggest concern I have right now, looking at the pump and the sending unit, is that this is kind of small and it does kink itself right in here, which isn't great. That's not ideal. I think it should be okay. I don't want to redo that whole thing, so I'm just not gonna. I'm gonna try not to worry about too much. I don't think so. I'll send it, and this mount in here is something like this. It's gonna be tight, but it's gonna fit just fine. It looks like. Okay, so here's the sender. I've got this thing drilled out already. I've got some 5/16-inch holes or so. And what I'll do is I'll put these grommets in here, and these will seal against the hole itself, hopefully. And then I will shove some of this wire through these holes. So that'll seal the hole and also allow, see, it is a little loose, but some RTV will help seal it up in there. And then I'll use this 12 gauge wire. This will go through the hole, and then this will give me my wires to the fuel pump. And that should give enough power to not short out circuits anywhere and not melt harnesses. So I'll go ahead and finish putting these grommets in here. Then I'll shove the wires through and then throw some fuel safe RTV, plug it into the fuel pump, throw it in the car. All right, so the fitment here is pretty tight. I think I've got this where it needs to be as far as the depth goes. It sticks out past this thing a little bit. There's a little metal tab here that was on this sending unit that I just put a rubber hose on, cut it in half, and then just use it as a cushion to keep this thing from rubbing against it and destroying it. Zip tied it on here so it doesn't move at all. And I think I've got this where it needs to be. So I'll do a test fit in the car, but based off the depth of the tank, it looks like the tank's about 9.5 inches deep or so. So here we go from the top. We're pretty close to 9.5 inches. Ideally, you want this thing pretty close to the bottom, but not like being squeezed to the bottom. Now, this sending unit does, or the strainer does have like a little thing to stop it from collapsing on itself, so it shouldn't be able to just crush that opening at all. So shouldn't have to worry about that. But as long as this all fits in there, I can just go ahead and tighten this stuff down, build this harness here, and then throw it in the car and forget about it. Then afterwards, I'll probably paint the top of it and then at least make it look decent, prevent it from rusting. So I'll have to do that to this side of it. Okay, so here it is. It seems like this is where it wants to be. It's going to sit in this spot there. It has these little notches, so you can't locate it anywhere else. And I think I got this thing in here pretty well. Yeah, it's in that little bucket. It seems to be, at least. You can kind of see it in there. It's going to be in that little bucket down there. I think we can send it. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten those fittings down and splice in this harness and basically cut the extra wires off of here too as well. All right, so this is ready to go in. I have the wiring harness heat shrinked with adhesive line shrink wrap. I don't know if that's going to withstand the fuel in the tank, but so even if this stuff does kind of dissolve in the tank, you know, the heat shrink itself should stay put. Even if the heat shrink does dissolve too, it's not like this stuff is going to short out in the tank. Fuel is an insulator. It's not going to, you know, cause an issue. So you can have exposed connections inside of a tank. You know, case in point right here, you know, so these connections inside of there are exposed, so it's not an issue. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut off this harness too. I forgot to do that still, but otherwise this is good to go. And so I'm going to send the sender inside of the tank. Okay. So since I had spent so much time in the back of the car looking at the fuel tank, looking at the brake lines, I had all that stuff out of the car, and I figured I might as well start tackling this rust because it was driving me insane looking at this thing. And it was always in the back of my mind that this car I'm working on is so rusty looking. I need to fix this thing, otherwise it's really not worth looking at this project at all. So I decided to do some quick and dirty rust tackling to kind of try and cut this stuff out to figure out how bad it really is. And if I can make it look somewhat decent, I'm okay with it. I'm not looking for perfection. I just wanted something that, you know, wouldn't tear itself apart and it would look okay from like at least 20 feet away. So the first step was to start wire wheeling the car just to see how bad that rust really was on the surface and see if it's actually somewhat deep, and then just start going to town and cutting out some of that other rust there too. I'll lean in with the caveat that I don't know what I'm doing here, you guys, so if you're trying to take some tips from me, please don't. I don't know what I'm doing, and I just don't like body work at all. I just hated looking at that rust. So I've pretty much decided that I'd rather look at holes in the fenders and the rockers than rust. If you look down here, you can see this is why it rusted. Something has been living inside of there, and this is its stash, and I just stole all of its goods. So I'm gonna go ahead and just vacuum all this stuff up now and get this mess off my floor. And hopefully I don't catch like some sort of virus or some shit. Today's video is brought to you by cardboard. All right, so I have the cardboard pieces cut out for all the places I'm gonna be filling in the body sections on this side. I still need to do that to the other side too. But otherwise, this is kind of the plan. I am going to fill in like the inside of this spot with some rust reformer stuff. And hopefully that'll slow down all that rust from actually like tearing through this thing. And then after all that, I think I'm going to go through with like some fluid film and just spray in all the cavities and That'll probably slow it down enough. There's still a lot of hidden rust behind everything. I think the plan is for the doors at least. I won't worry about fixing them perfectly. I'll make the surfaces look okay. Fluid film the inside, hope it doesn't rust through. Hopefully someday get replacement doors. Okay, so I'm gonna go cut up the other side, do the same thing there, get my cardboard cutouts, and then figure out if I have enough material to do this. All right, so that's how that looks. Looking like a fender now. All right, so what you're looking at here are my new fenders. All of this is here. I have a layout. I managed to fit them all in one piece of sheet metal. I think this is 18 gauge or 16 gauge. It's probably thicker than what's on there, honestly, by ever so slightly. And the stuff that was on there was rusted halfway through anyway, so anything stronger than what's there. I'm just hoping I don't blow through it when I do go to weld this thing on there. So I'm gonna go work on cutting this stuff out and hopefully get this thing one step closer to looking like a car. All right, so now that I've got the fuel tank in the car, I'm gonna start working on these fuel lines and getting all this stuff plumbed in. I've got some new nylon lines here for the car, gonna be running all nylon. And actually the car does already have nylon fuel lines, but I'm not sure if they're original to the car. If they are, that means they're like 40 years old now or 30 years old. These are the factory fuel lines right here. They are nylon. They have some sort of rubber coating here in this end of them, but further downstream, the rest of it's all nylon. I'm not sure what this protective coating is, but I'm just going to replace them because plastic gets old, I guess, and maybe it'll get brittle. Just seems like a safe thing to do for it. So I'm going to be running all nylon fuel lines here. So I've got some 3/8, some 5/16. Should be enough. I'm probably going to need to get some more of these fittings though. I only have 2 of them here, and I thought I had more, but I guess not. So I'll at least get things placed where they need to be. So here is one of the old fuel lines. You can see the fitting on here. Yeah, you can see here, this is where the fuel filter is. So it'll go from here all the way up to where that tank outlet is. So it'll go from there to there. So it's a pretty short run. And then somewhere in here, I'll put a flex fuel sensor because I'm going to be running E85. And that's also the reason why I'm trying to keep this thing pretty safe. Just run new fuel lines. Just don't worry about it. Replace it now and never have to think about it again. It should flow really well. So I'll go ahead and start pressing on some of these fittings. So since I have the hose here and the fittings here, I'm going to start with this and just do one end, figure out the length it's going to be. And then once I have that length there, I'll just go ahead and cut it and start with the next section there too as well, and just keep going on until we get this thing plumbed. And, all right, so to assemble the fuel lines, I'm using this old Dorman brake line repair tool thingamajig. I have had this for about, actually as long as I did this car. So probably 2016 is when I bought this, you know, and still have all the parts for it, but you know, it's not as good as it used to be. It slips sometimes, so I have to use the help of the vise. But basically what you do is you kind of shove this thing in here. Just kind of make sure I get this thing straight inside of here. And with that, we should be pretty good. So it'll just kind of squeeze itself in there. And then eventually, at some point, this thing starts to lose grip, and I need to like use the vise to keep pushing down. So that's what I'll do here. I'll get the vise and I'll basically just put it in here like that, and then just use this thing to squeeze it. All right, got the first one done. You can see It came out pretty well. It does leave a bit of a scar on there from the notches on the clamp, but otherwise it came out pretty well, so this should be pretty good. So I'll go ahead and mock this one up in the car and then get the next end done and keep this thing going. So you can see we got the fuel lines up here. I got them routed kind of through this section in here, and I think this is probably the safest area for it. It is a little close to the wheel well, but putting it on the other side of the subframe would get it pretty close to the steering rack and expose it more to the underside of the car for possible scrapes and bumps and stuff. This is the factory location. This is how they had it routed, so hopefully that's not going to give too many issues. I've got it zip tied a couple places there to help keep it nice and tight too. As long as nothing too crazy happens, we should be okay. So you can see that I reused all the factory mounts, and I reused this hose protection thing. It's like a larger hose that goes around it. That's just there to protect it from getting damaged, so that this way I can put it in places that it might rub, but it's going to be okay. So like this right there. So yeah, we have all these fuel lines over here going all the way to the back. So I also placed a flex fuel sensor here back by the tank. This is the cleanest spot for it. It's kind of out of the way, and I'll run the pigtail off of this somewhere up here, somewhere up into the body of the car. The last thing I need to do in the fuel lines back here is to connect the evap line. I still haven't quite done that yet. I think this is just going to take like a, I don't know, like a 1/4-inch rubber hose or something like that I'll just use to shove in here. And then this will connect all that in there and then go up to the front to the carbon canister. So otherwise, plumbing for the fuel lines back here is basically done. So the next thing I need to do now that I've got the fuel lines up here is figure out where I'm going to put the fuel pressure regulator. And this is the mount for it. It kind of sits in this little pocket down here and it gets mounted vertically, and this is kind of the return there. I want to put it up here on the firewall, so I'll need to basically bend this thing backwards so I can get it up against it. And I'll get this vacuum manifold mounted up there too as well and keep that thing out of the way. I'm pretty sure I can drill through this firewall and riv nut it. Hopefully I don't regret doing that. All right, so I've got this stuff mounted on here. I was able to get the nut certs in here. There's actually plenty of space. There's nothing behind this. I know there are some rivets here, but where I drilled was okay. So I've got the hole here, the hole on this one too as well, right there. And then some M8s here. So these are M5s, M5, M8s. And fuel line is routed to it, and it might go behind this fitting here. I'm not sure yet, but I need to get this thing in here and see how that fits. And then after that, I can massage this, make it all fit nicely in here. Then the feed line will go out here to the fuel rail. So that's the feed line right here. This is a 3/8 from the fuel pump. And that's pretty much how it's going to be. The next challenge is going to be plumbing the fuel rail itself, figuring out how that's all going to sit here. That'll get plumbed into this. It's going to be a return style system. And then up here I have my vacuum manifold, which you really won't see unless you're like really looking for it. But having this on the car, fuel lines being done, is kind of a nice hurdle to have done. Made some good progress here. A lot of stuff isn't that interesting to watch, so didn't film a lot of it because it's kind of just tedious, a little boring knickknacks here and there. Just all the little stuff that takes to plumb a car. Hopefully I filmed a good amount of it. Hopefully you like what you saw. So that's going to do it for this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.